You wake up at 6:45 a.m. in a one-bedroom flat you've rented for 4 years and never once thought of as home. Your alarm is the same alarm. Your route to the office is the same route. You work as a site engineer for a mid-sized construction contractor, and like every day, you'll spend 9 hours making someone else's building rise. At the site, you check rebar spacing on the third floor while your supervisor takes a call from the actual owner of the project. You've never met the owner. You've poured concrete for a man you'll never shake hands with. Lunch is a 15-minute stand-up affair, a dabba balanced on a stack of cement bags. Your phone buzzes. A college friend has sent a photo of himself standing in front of a half-built building with a booking open banner behind him. The caption reads, "Our project. Finally launched." You stare at it a second too long, and something in your chest tightens, something closer to recognition. That evening on your bike ride home, you pass a vacant plot you've passed 1,000 times, 2,400 square feet, weeds up to your knees, a faded, for sale board with a phone number half rubbed off. You've never really looked at it before. Tonight you stop. You stand at the edge of the plot and start doing math in your head. FSI, sellable area, rough construction cost per square foot. You've spent 6 years learning how buildings get built. You've never once asked yourself what it would take to be the one who decides to build it. You take a photo of the for sale board on your phone, telling yourself it's just curiosity. That night you lie in bed scrolling through property listings in your city instead of sleeping. You open a notes app and type a single line. What if? You don't show anyone. You just save it as a draft. The next morning at the site you notice things differently. The site office, the signboard with the developer's name in bold letters, the sample flat with its fresh paint smell. For the first time you imagine your own name on that board instead of someone else's. You know almost nothing about how to actually become a developer. But you know exactly what it feels like to build for someone else's dream instead of your own. That gap, between what you know and what you want, becomes the thing you can't stop thinking about. You start staying 20 minutes late after work, not to finish tasks, but to walk past that same vacant plot on your way home. The seed is planted. You don't call it a business plan yet. You just call it an itch you can't scratch. You start researching at night, after your flatmate is asleep, laptop brightness turned down so the light doesn't wake anyone. You learn the words before you understand them. RERA, FSI, carpet area, ready reckoner rate, commencement certificate. You calculate that plot's math again, this time seriously. Land cost, construction cost at roughly 1,800 rupee per square foot, approval costs, and a margin that suddenly looks a lot thinner than you imagined. You realize you have 6 lakhs rupees in savings and this plot alone needs closer to 80 lakhs rupees just to acquire before a single brick is laid. The number makes your stomach drop and for a moment you close the laptop and tell yourself to forget it. 2 days later you open it again anyway. You bring it up with your father over dinner, carefully like you're testing the temperature of water. He puts his fork down slowly and asks if you've lost your mind. You have a stable job, why gamble it on land and cement? You don't have a good answer yet, and his silence afterwards stings more than his words did. You call your closest friend from college, the one who always tells you the truth. He asks one question that stays with you for days. Do you even know anyone who will lend you money for this? You don't. Not yet. You spend your weekends now visiting municipal corporation counters instead of resting, standing in lines you don't fully understand. A clerk hands you a list of documents for land title verification, and you realize this single step alone could take months. You meet a small private financer a colleague introduces you to. The interest rate he quotes, nearly 30% annually, makes your palms sweat. You do the math on that too, and for the first time you understand that risk isn't a concept anymore, it's a monthly number with your name attached to it. At 2 a.m. one night you sit on your bed staring at a spreadsheet of numbers that refuse to add up cleanly no matter how you arrange them. You think about your father's face at dinner. You think about your EMI-free, boring, safe salary. You almost delete the spreadsheet. Instead, you open your notes app and reread that line from weeks ago. What if? And this time you don't close it. You decide to start smaller than the plot that started it all. Not a full building, Just one small redevelopment project, a single-owner bungalow plot you can convert into 4 flats. You negotiate with the landowner directly, offering him 2 flats in exchange for the land instead of paying him upfront, a joint development arrangement that keeps your own capital small. He's skeptical of a first-timer with no completed project to his name, and you spend 3 meetings just earning enough trust for him to say yes. You resign from your job on a Tuesday, handing in a letter you rewrote 4 times the night before. Your manager asks if you're sure. You say yes, though your hands are shaking slightly as you say it. Walking out of that office for the last time, you don't feel triumphant. You feel terrified and strangely more awake than you've felt in years. Your new office is the front seat of your bike and a WhatsApp number you give out to everyone who might help. You spend your first month just chasing signatures, the landowners, the architects, the structural engineers, for a joint development agreement that keeps stalling over minor clauses. You hire a young architect who's hungry for his first real project, and together you redraw the layout 4 times to maximize sellable area within the FSI limit. The municipal approval process alone eats 10 weeks, and every week feels like watching your own runway shrink. You start paying facilitation charges at a few counters just to keep your file moving, and it makes you uneasy in a way you don't talk about with anyone. Finally, the commencement certificate arrives in your hands, and you sit in your car for a full minute just staring at the stamp on it. You break ground with 4 laborers and a mixer machine, standing on site yourself because you can't yet afford to pay someone else to stand there for you. Cement prices jump mid-project without warning, and your carefully built budget takes its first real hit. You call the landowner to explain the delay, and instead just get a long, disappointed silence on the line. You skip your own salary that month to keep the site running. Your mother asks why you look thinner. You tell her it's just the heat. The structure reaches the 2nd floor and you post your first construction progress photo online, proud in a way you didn't expect to feel over grey concrete. 3 people message asking about booking a flat, and your heart genuinely races reading the notifications. Your first customer walks the site with you. A young couple expecting their first child, and something about showing them their future home makes the whole project suddenly feel real. They book a 2 BHK with a token amount, and you don't sleep that night from sheer relief and disbelief. A week later, monsoon hits early and work stops for 11 straight days. Water pooling where your foundation slab should already be curing. You watch your labor contractors' men sit idle under a tarpaulin. Each idle day a number you can't afford to ignore. Cash flow gets tight enough that you personally negotiate with your cement supplier for a 15-day payment extension, something you'd never imagined having to do. You start eating dinner standing at your desk, going through vendor bills instead of sitting down properly. A second customer backs out of their booking over a delay in the RER promised possession date, and the refund you owe them nearly empties your working account. You sit alone in your unfinished site office that night, lights off to save on the generator, and quietly wonder if you've made the biggest mistake of your life. You don't tell your father this part. You don't tell anyone this part. The next morning you go back anyway, because the labor contractor is waiting at the gate at 8 a.m. regardless of how you feel. A third booking comes in, this time from a referral, someone who heard about your project from the first couple you sold to. You realize that word of mouth is starting to do something advertising never could. Slowly you learn the vocabulary of survival, how to read a structural engineer's report in 5 minutes, how to negotiate steel prices, how to spot a shortcut a contractor is trying to slip past you. You start doing your own site supervision at dawn before meetings, still in the same worn-out shoes from your engineering job. 6 months in, the building tops out, and you stand on the terrace looking down at the same vacant plot you once stared at from your bike. You've sold 6 of the 12 flats. It's not enough yet, but it's not nothing either. A rival small developer in the area undercuts your remaining flat prices, and you spend 3 sleepless nights deciding whether to match him or hold your ground. You choose to hold, betting on the finishing quality you didn't cut corners on. For the first time in months, you allow yourself 1 full day off, and you spend most of it anxious, checking your phone every 20 minutes anyway. With finishing work almost done, an interior contractor recommends you stage the show flat properly. Proper lighting, staged furniture, professional photos. You spend money you don't really have to spare on staging a single sample flat, telling yourself it's an investment, hoping you're right. The photos go up online on a Friday evening, and by Sunday, 4 separate families have scheduled site visits. One of them is a government employee eligible for a home loan sanction almost instantly. And he books not one flat but two, one for himself and one for his son. That single conversation, on a plastic chair in your half-finished site office, changes your cash position more than the previous 4 months combined. For the first time, you're not calculating how to survive the week. You're calculating how fast you can start the next project. You go back to the original landowner from your very first plot, the one you couldn't afford 18 months ago. And this time he takes your calls seriously. You realize the difference isn't luck. It's that you now have a finished building people can walk through and trust. The occupancy certificate for your first project finally comes through, months later than promised but real nonetheless, and you personally hand the first keys to that young couple from the second floor. The husband hugs you, right there in the driveway, and you have to look away for a second so no one sees your eyes water. You realize this is the first time since you started that the risk has felt worth it, not just survivable. A local bank, having watched your first project complete on schedule for its last phase, approaches you directly with a project loan offer for your next one, at a fraction of the private financer's rate. You sit across the desk from the bank manager and realize you're no longer the anxious first-timer who couldn't get anyone to lend to him. You hire your first full-time employee, a site supervisor, so you can finally stop being on-site every single hour of every single day. The first morning you don't go to the site, you feel a strange, guilty kind of relief. You sign your second joint development agreement, this time for 18 flats instead of 12, with 3 separate landowners instead of 1. You learn, almost overnight, that managing 3 landowners' expectations is a different skill entirely from managing bricks and cement. A dispute nearly derails the second project. One co-owner wants to back out mid-agreement over a family disagreement that has nothing to do with you. You spend 2 tense weeks mediating a family's internal conflict just to keep your own project alive. It resolves, and you walk out of that final meeting more exhausted than any construction deadline ever made you. You realize surviving that moment taught you something no course or video ever could, that this business is built as much on people as it is on concrete. 3 years in, you wake up at 6:45 a.m., the same time as before, but almost nothing else is the same. You check site photos on your phone over coffee instead of rushing straight to a site yourself. You now have 2 completed projects behind you and a third underway, with a small core team, a site supervisor, an accountant, and a sales coordinator, running day-to-day work you once did entirely alone. Your monthly income, after loan servicing and overhead, sits somewhere between 3 lakhs rupees and 5 lakhs rupees depending on the project cycle. Real, but never as steady as your old salary was. You still personally sign every major vendor payment, because trust, you learned, is something you build slowly and lose instantly. You drive past your very first plot sometimes. Now finished 4-story building with lights on in every flat, families living lives you helped make possible. You still remember the exact spot where you stood the night you first stopped your bike there. You attend your first project's residence Diwali gathering, invited as a guest, and stand a little apart, quietly proud, watching families who trust you enough to invite you into their homes. You've learned to read a soil report and a family's hesitation with equal fluency. You've also learned what this cost you, the year you barely saw your parents, the friendships that faded because you had no time to nurture them, the version of stability you gave up permanently. You still get anxious before every RER renewal, every possession date, every cement price hike. The fear never fully leaves, it just gets quieter. You mentor a young site engineer now, the way no one really mentored you, because you remember exactly how lost you once felt standing at the edge of an empty plot. Your father, who once questioned your decision at that dinner table, now proudly tells relatives which buildings in the city are yours. You haven't stopped being an engineer at heart. You still walk your sites, still check rebar spacing yourself sometimes, just because you want to, not because you have to. You take a Sunday off most weeks now, though some part of you still checks vendor messages before breakfast out of old habit. You know developers with bigger projects, bigger names, bigger risk appetites than you'll probably ever have. And you've made peace with not needing to be them. What you have instead is 3 buildings standing where empty plots used to be and hundreds of keys you personally handed to people who will live their lives inside walls you decided to build. You still remember the exact interest rate of that first private loan. You'll probably remember it for the rest of your life. Some nights you still drive past that very first vacant plot from before any of this started, just to remember what standing there once felt like. You built something real out of a what if typed into a notes app at 1 a.m. It cost you more than money. It gave you back more than income ever could. This is your life now, built one plot, one signature, one sleepless night at a time.